Hello, peeps. Back again with part 2 of the Bombay Land Revenue Code. It'll be a little shorter, but I think it contains those terms of the Bombay Land Revenue Code with which we are concerned every day if we are in litigation or even otherwise doing revenue work. So these phrases are, I'll just throw them out to you and then talk about them a little later. We have these mystifying forms called village form number 712, what in the vernacular is called Satbarna Uttara. That is to say, the extracts of the Form 7 and Form 12. And there is something called Gam Namuna number 6, which is a record of rights. And I am trying to understand the interplay between the section, the rules, and these forms as we find them in real life. It has been quite a journey because I thought I knew everything about these, but I did not. When I went into the text of the Act and the rules, it was difficult for me to trace it out. Two persons, Jamshed and Sujay, have helped me to do this, and I acknowledge with gratitude the hours of labor that they've saved me. So let's jump into it right away. 712 and Form 6. Distinction between the two, but how does it arise? So first is section 135D of the Bombay Land Revenue Code, which talks about, and again, I want to remind you that it was an old English time law, and 135D, of course, was engrafted in much later, I think after independence. But 135D says, it's interesting, the designated officer shall enter manually or electronically by a automated process every report made to him under 135C or any intimation of acquisition of transfer of right, either manually or electronically. The purport of sections 135A to 135H and onwards is that if there has been a transfer of right in a land from one person to another, the text, the Act seems to read that it is the duty of the officer to seek out such information, and if and when he finds such information, he has to make the necessary entries. Usually it is the person who has acquired the title who wishes to enter his acquisition of title either by interstate succession, by transfer, that is to say by sale or exchange, or by lease. And he wants that the record of rights should mention his name. Now, it is of vital importance that if I have acquired some right in the land, I will need to have my name entered into it, because at every stage, from the very beginning, applying for electricity, applying for water, applying for GST, applying for a myriad other licenses, I will have to show that for applying for building permission, construction permission, use permission, industrial licenses, I will have to show what title I have in the land. Either I am a lessee, a tenant, an owner. So record of rights is very important, and there are fights about whose name should be reflected in the record of rights, which are frequent and fertile areas of litigation, which you will come across at the beginning of your practice. Along with this, there are rules 104 to 113 of the Gujarat Land Revenue Rules. All read together throw up these three forms whose reference you will find frequently, whose significance is huge, but whose provenance, as I told you, is pretty hazy. In later legislations, whenever a form is prescribed under an Act, if you see the prescribed form in the bare text of the Act, the form will usually contain the legend, see rule so and so, see section so and so. But this law of 1879 did not have this crisp correlation. Though the Bombay Land and Revenue rules were enacted much later, they are also old legislation. Briefly put, the Form 6 is a record of the right. When I purchase land, typically purchase from another person, if my purchase is legal and valid, and the registering authority, the Mamlatdar will have to check that it does not fall foul of a myriad other laws, then my name will be entered and the type of right I have will be entered in this record of rights. Now the type of right meaning I may have a lease, I may have a permanent lease, I may have an ek sali which I get from the collector, I may have a sanadi grant which the collector has given to me by way of a sanad or a permanent license, permanent ownership rights. I may purchase it by transfer from another person. All this will be mentioned in the record of rights. The date by which their rights are acquired, from whom are they acquired, and who has acquired them, and very importantly, the instrument by which those rights are acquired. So that is the record of rights. But a far more contentious form is related to rules 104 and 113. At this stage, please stop listening, open the Bombay Land Revenue Code and see rule 113.
104.
104 first and then 113. So 104 reads like this. Record of rights and mutations, the index of land and the register of disputed cases shall be kept in forms O, P and Q respectively, provided that in sites surveyed under 131, these forms may be modified by the Director of Land Records to suit the requirements of cities and all that. All later entries will be termed mutations. So this is a very current word because we are dealing with COVID right now, and COVID is a mutation of a type of coronavirus. We had SARS, we had MERS, those were also coronaviruses. This is also coronavirus. This is COVID. It's a mutation. What does this word mutation mean? It means a change of form. So entries, and the entry which will be first will be, say, it is land given to me in 1935, and thereafter on my demise my heirs take it. When my name is, as they say, record mathi kami karyu, removed from the record, and the names of my heirs are put in, that is called a mutation, and it is colloquially referred to as ME, mutation entry. And on these MEs, whether they should be there, whose name should be there, are RTS proceedings, which are the bread and butter of every small time first year, second year, third year lawyer, if he can get them. Because parties are fighting with each other as to whether your name should be there, or my name should be there, or yours should not be there and mine should be there. So RTS proceedings is a phrase you will come across, which are arising from mutation entries. The other phrase you saw here was record of rights, which I have discussed, index of land and register of disputed cases. So I have had occasion to speak with some of the senior most practitioners of in revenue cases, the late Shri Barrister Arvind Bhai Patel, and I asked him, Arvind Bhai, what does RTS stand for? But he said it is to do with mutation entry. I don't think there is a particular form like, say, FCI is Food Corporation of India. RTS proceedings, I don't know what it stands for. I must confess my frank ignorance. If somebody can enlighten me, it would be wonderful. So, this mutation business will continue from time to time, is eternal, and that mutation will take place in 712, in form number 6. The really interesting, it only takes a lawyer to find this interesting, but village form 7 and 12, they are usually like Hansel and Gretel, Lakho Buso, they go together. So village form number 7 has got these details. It has the survey number, block number, part number, nature of tenure. So nature of tenure means, am I the owner? Have I got it as restricted tenure? This is where the short form na sa would be mentioned if I have it given to me by restricted impartible tenure. Na sa, if you remember from the first lecture, is Navi Sharat. So I am not the unfettered owner of this. I have limited rights. This is what you find on the top left of the 712 form, the form 7. On the right you have occupancy rights. Litini uppar ne litini niche. If you see the form, you will find litini uppar is the occupant. Again, remember the first lecture. Land Revenue Code is to do with occupation, who is liable to pay land revenue. So, who is the top dog? Occupant. Litini niche is secondary rights. Secondary rights may be rights of a tenant. They may be rights of a lessor. They may be rights of a mortgagor. Or such secondary rights, disputed rights, will be in secondary rights. In Gujarati we say bija hakma, in the secondary rights column. Then this form also carries a wealth of detail. It tells you how much land is irrigated, how much is not irrigated, how much is very wet land fit for making rice, for growing rice, how much is Kharaba land category A, Kharaba land category B. I think the difference between A and B is Kharaba land is where nothing grows, but B is that which has got crevices and is not level. Then it tells you about how much is the land revenue and irrigation cess. So much for form number 7. But its brother or first cousin is form number 12. And this is a mine of information. Because the columns are year, name of cultivator, Kharif Rabi crop, and other cultivations. I have seen, to my personal knowledge, form number 12 going back to the early 30s, where you really come across a brush with history when you open a photocopy of a village form number 12, where you see that in this land, in 1936, for this much area, the crop of X was taken, of Y was taken, Z, all the crop is written. Kapas, gaun, chokha, that is to say cotton, wheat, rice, jowar, bajra. It's virtually an encyclopedia into what has happened on this land. And the great feature about this is, again, remember I mentioned that if you did not cultivate or if you did not follow the conditions, the lands could be taken away from you. We usually rely upon this to show, sir, see, in these 3 years when I am supposed to have not cultivated, though I am where I should have cultivated but I have not cultivated, there was famine. Because in village form number 12, famine will also be mentioned, or a drought will also be mentioned. So you can say that this is drought time and therefore we have not been able to cultivate. So whenever you have cases of this, please take the trouble of going into the document itself. Do not rely upon a typed copy. The typed copy will be replete with holes where the typist has blithely said avachya and moved on. One should, as they say, devil is in the details. Once you move into this, your case will be ready and you will have a wealth of information which otherwise only the government authorities have. So a small but very important part of the Bombay Land Revenue Code, I think, has been covered with this. Another feature of the Bombay Land Revenue Code is the recovery proceedings. Tens, if not hundreds of laws say that X amount is to be then recovered as an arrear of land revenue. Now, arrear of land revenue is governed by sections 149 onwards. And it will be worthwhile to open that. (148) to be exact. Liabilities incurred by default. So if there is any default of paying land revenue, how that amount is to be recovered is shown to us by the subsequent sections. Now I want, or it is desirable that you pay close attention to this, because it very much dovetails with, or is almost a replication of those provisions of Order 21 of the Civil Procedure Code, which talk about how monies are to be recovered by selling the property of the judgment debtor. So when court sales take place, how is the property sold? That is replicated here in the Bombay Land Revenue Code. Now this is an older code, the 1879. Civil Procedure Code is quite young, relatively, 1908. But I have seen other laws, other land revenue laws of other states. For example, Punjab and Haryana, where there is a reported decision, exactly matches this. So if you get this idea, you will get an idea of the overarching legal theory of how these laws operate. Now 149 talks about, there is a subsection, the subclause 2, which says collector may realize others' demands also. So demands of other authorities, once certified by the collector, can be recovered as an arrear of land revenue after giving notice to the defaulter. So those provisions going ahead say that if the property of the defaulter is movable, it must be sold immediately. Then it says about what properties cannot be sold. And here I have to give some homework to you if you want to get the full amplitude of this section. Section 156 says, all such properties as is by the Code of Civil Procedure exempted from the sale or sale and execution shall be exempted from sale under this code. So look up those provisions of the Civil Procedure Code and find out which properties cannot be sold in satisfaction of a decree. Same properties cannot be sold in satisfaction of a demand for land revenue. Very personal things like some personal clothes and writing equipment, such like. Then very interesting provision, section 157. A person may be arrested if he doesn't pay land revenue. But the law gives maxima. He cannot be retained with the collector for a period more than 10 days. The collector has to let go of him, and then he has to go to civil prison. Civil prison, as is mentioned under Civil Procedure Code. And there also he cannot be incarcerated, cannot be kept under lock and key for any period more than the maximum permissible by the Civil Procedure Code. I want you to pause here for a moment and reflect upon the weeks and months and I think years that the chairman of Sahara Group spent in prison because he didn't give the money. As lawyers, we were shocked because the last time I had looked and a person was sent to prison because he could not pay a debt was, I think, in the Pickwick Papers in the Victorian era, when debtor's prison was in force, and a person merely because he owed money could be sent to prison. That law has undergone a change everywhere in civilized societies, but we have these aberrations where the person was kept in jail because he could not pay the amount as he promised to the Supreme Court and spent months and months in jail. So, the Bombay Land Revenue Code says no defaulter shall be detained in imprisonment for a period longer than that permitted by law in case of execution of a decree by civil court. So much for that. Then it is very interesting that how should this sale be effected? And there the procedure is this, that on the first day when the auction takes place and the sale is knocked down in favor of the bidder, highest bidder, he has to deposit 25% of the bid amount on that day itself. And that is really difficult when big auctions take place, where the purchase price goes into tens of lakhs, if not crores. It's difficult to carry 25 lakh rupees around with you. But anyway, that is a provision of law. But an even more significant provision comes thereafter, which is that within 15 days of the sale being confirmed in favor of the highest bidder, the entire sale consideration has to be deposited. The words used are in section 172, 173, 174. The full amount of purchase money shall be paid by the purchaser before sunset on the 15th day on which the sale has taken place, or if the 15th day happens to be a Sunday or any authorized holiday, before sunset on the first office day after the 15th day. So he has to pay it. Now there is at least one reported decision of the Supreme Court where the full sale consideration was tendered by a demand draft into the court, but the court officers did not deposit it. And the court held that this does not amount to compliance with section 174. That sale was cancelled and the property was put up for re-auctioning. The section 175 says that the effect of default, that you bid at a sale, it is knocked down in your favor, but you can't deposit one or the other thing, then the property is put up for sale again. 175, 176 say that if the property on resale fetches an amount less than what you had bid, the difference between the amount at which it is sold and what you have bid will be recovered from you if you are the defaulting bidder, and that amount will be recovered as an area of land revenue from you. So these are the areas which we find are most commonly involved in litigations, which the type of litigation which are smallish matters which come to lawyers who are starting practice, especially lawyers who are from relatively more rural areas, even class C towns will find such matters to be their bread and butter to begin with. And please do not say no, that oh, I don't do this work, I only do work of X type. In the beginning, you take all kinds of work, please do it. And all highfalutin ideas which you may have had in your 5th year of law or 3rd year of law, as the case may be, that I want to specialize in X and Y, Please fold them up with your sanad and put them in your filing cabinet. All that will come later. First, prepare yourself in the law, the overarching legal principles, and then specialization will come as according to your expertise, effort, and luck. So much for the second part. Thank you very much. Have a good weekend. Bye.